Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we offer a brief lesson from a section of today's reading from the One Year Bible. My name's Stephen Mizell. Jay Rivenbark and I are joined today by Alyssa Bream, and we are in the book of Psalms this week, and we're in Psalm 54 today specifically, and we are talking about some things that we didn't expect to talk about today, but I think it will be a good opportunity for us to think about how we respond in times of trouble, how we work through our own hardships and difficult times, and how we can anchor our faith when life is full of conflict. So I hope you'll grab your Bible and a pen and paper, and let's have a conversation around the Word of God. Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story. We're in the book of Psalm this week. It's the March 11th edition, Psalm 54, verses 1 through 7. And this is when the Ziphites had betrayed David to Saul. 1 Samuel 23, his friends have turned into his enemies, if you will. And before I ask some questions, was there anything in this that you wanted to make sure we covered?
For me, it was the types of prayers that David put forth here. One was the fact it was as if he was reminding God, and when God already knows everything, but he was saying, "Pay attention to me. I want you to focus in, lean in."
A lot of his writing is that way.
It sure is. It's like, I want some FaceTime. I want some personal attention. I want to make sure you're dialed in to me. And he didn't seem to have any problem with that approach whatsoever. And the other part of his prayer that caught my attention was the fact where he didn't have any problem praying for the end of his enemies, to bring an end to them, because
he prayed that a lot too.
because they were evil and wicked. He just like,
take them out,
move on. Yeah.
I went back and all week, actually, like 3 of the days specifically say, connect to stories in 1 Samuel, I think like 22 to 23.
23, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then the other 2, his experiences are woven through all of this. And really, as you're reading it, if you can picture that as like a movie, and it maybe what helped me was this David movie, because so much we focus on
the animated movie.
The animated movie, yeah.
It's
and
good.
I haven't watched the Amazon Prime one. Have you? I don't know where.
Is it not the same? Oh, you mean The House of David?
The House of David.
I've seen a couple episodes.
And I don't know where they're at in that. It's on my watch list, my very long watch list. And so, but really, that just how much betrayal and how many enemies he had was crazy. And then this is what, and I don't know, maybe you guys will be like, that's a stupid comment, Alyssa. That's a foolish comment. But
I don't think we'll say that.
Okay. You'll say it in your heart.
God judges our heart.
The way that he calls them my enemies, because I think this is what I was trying to wrap my head around, is they were David's enemies. They weren't necessarily God's enemies. Because there's times when we think of enemies of God, and there's times, and that differentiation there stuck out to me this time, and I went back and read again, and like, there weren't any times that these people, because Saul, I think, is like, in some ways, obviously he's very evil, but in some ways he's trying to have a kingdom and trying to do, in some ways, what he thinks is right.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, that differentiation there struck me this time. And I don't know if you have any input on that.
Well, as you were talking, that they were his enemies, not necessarily God's, but I thought in the concept of natural life, if my children or grandchildren have an enemy, meaning that are trying, I'm not talking about somebody they just got a difference with, but I'm talking about trying to hurt or harm them, they become my enemies, in theory. And so I kind of view it from that lens too. I think he makes the equation, if I'm doing what you call me to do as your child, then my enemies are also your enemies. I kind of see it in that perspective.
I think that there are enemies is a strong word. You know?
And it can have a broad definition.
Yeah. I think in terms of I believe that there have been some people in my life I could qualify as an enemy. They wanted my destruction. Nothing would have made them happier than for me to have my demise. But I don't know that God necessarily viewed them that way. And that's hard for us to grasp.
Let me ask a question.
Okay.
And related to that, I think that would be the case sometimes, but let's suppose that those people who were against you, that you perceive to be a legitimate enemy, if they can carry out their plans and purposes, then it negates God's plan and purpose for you in the kingdom. Would you still say that they weren't necessarily his enemies in that regard?
Yeah, I don't know. That's an awful strong word, and I would be hard pressed to call somebody my enemy. Mm-hmm. I would be more likely to say, okay, they're foolish, misguided, wounded, all of the things that can create that.
I think an enemy, to meet that definition, I think has to be intentional and sold out to the idea and plan that I'm going to take out, destroy, bring down.
Yeah. That would be a very small number.
Versus just simply a conflict or an issue.
They're probably, I could name one or two people, I think, that I believe I would qualify as my enemy. Mm. I don't know how God views them. If they make it to heaven, I want them to have a different zip code. But
you're like, what are you doing here?
Or if I make it.
That's right. Surprise.
If they're right and I'm wrong. I don't want to derail the whole podcast, so we might not even get to questions. But David is a hard character for me to figure out. Because on the outside, he is this warrior who killed tens of thousands of people. Like, that's what we know of him. But the Psalms are just wah, 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 wah. Like, it's hard to see these two. It's hard for me to put them together because almost all, that's an exaggeration. A lot of his writing is, God, you don't care about me. When are you going to pay attention to me? I'm dying. My flesh is turning into, grass. Just all of the things. It's just, it's hard for me to see those two characters together.
Well, I think it shows his vulnerability and the struggles that he did have. He was a strong guy and could lead people into battle and conflicts. And he seemed to, in some instances, I think he enjoyed that. It was part of his wheelhouse of who he was. But yet he had this fragileness about him emotionally that, thankfully for us, he reflects that in a lot of his writing. So we get that insight. So we don't just have this perception. He's a superhuman guy. He has all these strengths, callings, and giftings, but yet he also struggled in these areas. And I think that's often a portrait of who we are. We have our strengths, we have our weaknesses.
I have a funny story I need to tell y'all. Go ahead, you say.
I think our culture has lost the art of lament. And I think that we have somehow just, we don't know how to lament in a healthy way. I think generally a lot of people who have those frustrations, like if David was nowadays, but that is a very healthy way to deal with it. Like these poems that are like, woe is me. I mean, he was stuck in caves and all of this. And that's what he had to do to, I think, process it so that he could go out and be the strong fighter and warrior and leader that he needed to be. Because just because you're a strong warrior and leader doesn't mean you don't have those.
We just
strong
don't get
emotions.
this insight into most people.
Correct.
Like,
Right.
because there are things I write I don't want anybody to read.
Right.
You know, I don't want you coming behind me. And I don't think he wrote these expecting us to be sitting on
Right.
two couches
Very true.
in
Talking about 'em
2026
publicly.
thing, deciphering, you know, what his mental state was when he wrote this. But some of it also is culture too that would be different, right?
Mhm.
And let me give you the example. David was very artistic. He was a musician, a singer. You know, that's how he comes into Saul's house as the harp player. You know, and we typically it is not uncommon for, God help me for using the wrong word, but because I've spent time in the music world, so I can say this with a little bit of authority. Musicians can be flaky at times. You know, they have a little bit of that. I don't know what the word is to them, and you don't often think of musicians as warriors, right? They tend to, you know.
I'm no son that created some conflicts.
yeah. But the funny story I wanted to tell you was I saw a reel just in the last 48 hours of us recording this of a guy, and I'm pretty sure he's probably tweaking out on drugs, and he had gone in a Guitar Center and was stealing a guitar. He was walking out with a guitar, and Guitar Center's full of musicians, right? You know, the employees are want to be full time. So they're in there. They get to play all the gear and get discounts on the gear. Anyway, an employee in there had grabbed him as he was going out the door, put him in a chokehold. I mean, a submission like wrestling chokehold, choking him out. And he gets up off the guy and tells him, he says, "You get out right now." And the guy won't get, and he grabs him by the back of his head and his pants, and he walks him to the door, uses his head for a battering ram, takes him out on the sidewalk, drops him on the sidewalk, and he walks back in to the store. And as we were sitting here talking, it made me think, like, that's not the average kind of person I know. He had to be a bass player, because that's what I was doing. He had to be a bass player. That would be a musician joke, I guess. But anyway, now we've completely gone sideways on this podcast. Let me ask a question. What anchors your faith during conflict?
Some of the things that David did, prayer, praise, worship, sometimes reflection anchors, remembering what God has done for you in the past and how he has worked, being reminded of future hope and blessedness. And so there's many aspects, at least for me, that anchor faith during conflict, and was previously mentioned. Sometimes community is a big part of that. People rally around you. It's not just a singular thing for me.
All of those things work, but I think the key to it is it's going to be the things that you've built when your life was good that's going to anchor you. You can't walk into a conflict or into a bad situation or whatever and pull from something that you don't already have in you. Yes, there is God's grace in those situations and all of that, but really the habits and relationships that you build when life is good are what can sustain you when life gets tough, because trying to build those when it's tough is much more difficult than when it's good.
Yeah, the thing that stuck out to me right here that I don't, and I think I have heard it, I have heard it used, and it probably turned me off when I heard it used. But when I read it, I go, okay, maybe that has some value. Verse 6, he says, "I will sacrifice a free will offering." It's not a mandatory offering. It's not my tithes. I'm gonna give something right now in this moment of conflict that goes along with the praise. And you know, I've heard television preachers, that would be where I would hurt it most. If you're going through whatever, sow a seed, right? Often very manipulative. They would have probably had a result that they were looking for. But I also think there have probably been some times in my life where giving was my salvation, where that act of submission was, okay, this is, I don't have it all figured out, but this is an act of submission. And I do think it is, as much as praise, as much as community. I think giving becomes an act of submission to say, okay, I'm not in charge here, but I'm going to give this to God. And it becomes almost like a symbol of saying, okay, physical action of here it is, Lord, I'm going to give it to you. Thank you for joining us again today on One Single Story. Just want to encourage you to let God fight your battles and you keep your heart clean. I hope you'll join us again on the next edition of One Single Story.